But 30 minutes before the shooting, we were walking through the crowd, looking for people who needed aid. And him and two of his buddies walk up, and he looks at us and he goes, "If I catch one of you motherfuckers alone, you're dead."
Uh-oh.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnnie Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnnie Walker Dread Show.
This is an interview that took place about 3 days after the shooting by a YouTube channel called Hair of the Dog. What we have is a couple of progressives. They chat on occasion, I suppose. I don't know much about them. They do hang out on the left end of the spectrum, and you can kind of tell they grimace at a few times when Ryan is speaking. However, they do a good job here of allowing Ryan to tell his story. They don't try to contradict him. They don't try to dispute him. They're going to go ahead and allow him to talk, and he's going to be making some rather interesting claims. With no further ado, Hair of the Dog.
I want to introduce a very special guest this morning. This is Ryan. Ryan was there, and we actually showed the video on Wednesday, and Ryan is pushing back on us as well as other journalists for that video clip because he says that it was cut too soon. So Ryan, welcome this morning.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start first with the video so that everyone who didn't watch Wednesday for whatever reason can see what we're actually talking about. And then I'd like for you to speak to what was cut in this that we missed, okay? So here's the video.
Trap this goddamn bullshit business in, I get it. But you left the city open.
Well, do you know what the cops told us today? They were like, we're going to push them down by you because you can deal with them. And then we're going to leave.
See?
And then as soon as they said
the second the shots fired, I had to tell like 6 people it wasn't fucking you guys.
Yeah. So like we fucking, as soon as they said that bullshit to us, people hurt. Oh, you're hurt. You need to...
Okay, Ryan, that's all that was circulated. So what happened after this? You said it was a bad cut.
It was cut before and after. What you see in the video is a discussion between myself and my friend that was there with me, who is also a veteran, discussing what was going on. And we had one individual from BLM who was not happy with it at all, and we all weren't happy with it. And we were trying to explain to him that we didn't know what happened. And then the guy who actually shot footage came up, and me and him had a discussion, and he asked what we were doing out here. And I mean, I think it's Free Thought Project posted the full 30-minute video this guy put out. But the conversation was about 8 minutes long. And we were open and honest that we were typically sympathetic to BLM. I've done marches.
Right away, we hear something coming from Brian that tends to defy or at least be inconsistent with the claim that he is a white supremacist. He is claiming he's a supporter of the Black Lives Movement. Throughout the night, and I explored the entire Rittenhouse movements, in which he is in a large percentage of the footage. Just to say that he was there that night is an understatement. He and Kyle were basically tagging alongside each other for most of the night. The interactions that he had appeared to be mostly positive with people. At no point does Ryan try to instigate any kind of action. And at one point, he even tries to calm down one of the patriots who had completely started antagonizing people. So there's nothing that takes place during that night that indicates that he has any antagonism towards Black Lives Matter. However, he does have a past social media presence that has come under fire. We'll talk about that in a separate video, but just to note that there are some inconsistencies between what he is claiming here and in his past. There may be some possible explanations for that. We'll explore that in another video. I also want to mention that his claim that the footage was edited so that the first part and the final part are cut out, leaving only the middle. We saw the same thing happen with Kyle. During the time in which Kyle was asked point blank, are you carrying any non-lethal weapons? Kyle responds, no, we're not carrying non-lethal. He then goes on to help an injured protester. People that took that footage cut out the first part where he's asked the question, are you carrying non-lethal, and the part where he's helping an injured protester, and left the middle part where he says, I'm not carrying non-lethal, or we're not carrying non-lethal. That was done to make it look like he was bragging about the fact that he's not here with non-lethal, he's out to hurt people. He wants to kill, kill, kill. And that's done on purpose. I'm absolutely convinced that the mainstream media did that on purpose to try to paint the confrontation here. It scores viewership, it gets lots of retweets. And unfortunately, I think the same thing happened to Ryan in his exchange here.
We weren't there to be against them or against anybody. And they kind of picked the clip where I was telling them exactly what the cops had told us, and the other BLM member cut me off there at the end. And then further on down the discussion, we had the discussion about why the cops were fucked up for doing this. You know, they don't care about the people and stuff like that, and you know, that's what was pissing people off.
Okay, so let me make sure that I understand. You live in Wisconsin.
Correct.
So you saw all of this stuff going on in the headlines, and you went down to Kenosha for what reason?
Primarily, we were getting word from people that we knew down there that the government, the cops, they were doing absolutely nothing to protect the citizens of Kenosha, to protect their property. They were just protecting, you know, government institutions, you know, the courthouse and places like that. You know, the places where the people who are angry about this, myself included, should be taking our anger out of them. Instead, they were gassing them, running over aid stations, and running them into the community at large and just letting what happened happen.
Wow.
So you start to hear a very heavy anti-government message coming from Ryan. He's very consistent on that, and I think it's something that both sides of the argument can probably concede on, is that he has no love for the police, he has no love for government authority at all.
Okay, so that is the reference to your statement that we saw in the video, that they said that they were going to push the Black Lives Matter protesters towards your group.
Correct. They came up to us there about halfway through the night and said that's what they were going to do. And we were all like, you're going to do what? Like, no. Like, we don't want any part of this. And before we could even really react to it, they walked off, and here they came with their Bearcats and their Max Pros.
So he has a claim here that the police have told him that they're going to turn over the policing of the community to him. This is going to be a claim that the prosecution is going to try to attack when he's on the stand as being pretty hard to believe. The prosecution is going to have to undermine his credibility as much as possible, and you'll see why when he makes the claim later. That's really that really makes it tough to pin any kind of murder charge on Kyle. So credibility-wise, this is a bit hard to believe that the police would actually say this. He's going to have to answer to this on the stand.
Did they know that you were there to support Black Lives Matter?
I don't think they understood what anybody was out there to do. We've had cops come up to us earlier in the day and say, one cop I had an exchange with before everything got started really was like, man, there's a lot of friendly guns out here. I feel good about this. And I looked him right in the face and I said, you know, we're not here to be friendly to you. Like, we're here to make sure the people in the area don't get hurt. And
throughout the night, he did make such statements. the comments he's making about we're there just to help the community, we're here just to help everybody, we're not here to side with anyone, has been backed up with some of the comments that he made throughout the night. So at this point, I believe he's telling the truth. I think he actually did tell the people that, look, we're not here to support the patriots, we're not here to support the right wing or the left wing. We're here to ensure that as Black Lives Matter protests, that nobody gets hurt and no property is damaged.
We saw the Kenosha Guard post, and we had all had our little talk on Facebook, and we're like, that's a fat op right there. They're trying to get people in there that they know they can catch up and wrap you up. We're not going to deal with that. We'll just go down there and find a business owner who needs help. And
okay, so this is an important comment he's making. He's saying that they're going to go to Kenosha and just find somebody that needs help. One of the questions that arises is, did the property owner ask Kyle specifically to guard the property? One thing that he's claiming here is that maybe Kyle did, but he didn't. They showed up, and he's going to back that up with some more commentary in a little bit that's going to show that he didn't go to Kenosha with the express purpose of defending a certain property.
But as far as deputizing anyone, I didn't hear them say that, and nobody that I was around had talked about it or asked about it.
Okay.
I know that Kenosha Guard did ask to be deputized by the sheriff, and the sheriff said that he refused to do it.
Okay,
But
to clarify, Kenosha Guard is a militia. They're not actually National Guard.
no, they're not National Guard at all. And I'm not sure.
Okay, so his claim is that the Kenosha Guard asked the sheriff to deputize them. That's conjecture. It's hearsay. He really does not have any direct knowledge of that. I don't think I would put any stock in that claim.
If they were a militia that was formed well before this, or just an impromptu thing.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really speak on that.
Okay, fair enough. So, did you actually have an opportunity to speak to the shooter that night, Kyle Rittenhouse?
Yes, actually. When we rolled up down there, we found a bunch of young men armed in front of a business with the business owner. And we all kind of made the agreement, hey, these guys look like they could use some help, because there's only about three or four of them.
Okay, an important point here. He's claiming that they went to Kenosha, found Kyle and maybe a couple of other kids that were watching over a property, and kind of felt that they were understaffed and that he felt obligated to help them. This is important because what it shows is that Kyle and Ryan really have no connection. They have no relationship at all. They didn't know each other before the night was over. And afterwards, it appears that Ryan doesn't even seem to know much about Kyle, even after walking with him pretty much the entire night. So there's really no connection between Kyle and Ryan. This is important in another aspect. Ryan's background in terms of his supposed anti-Semitism, supposed white supremacy leanings have been pushed onto Kyle. There was a YouTuber named Thought Slime who made a horrible video that tried to essentially pin Kyle down as a white supremacist because he knew Ryan, that he was in the proximity of Ryan. It's a ridiculous statement, completely irresponsible on his part to produce such a video without any verification of the facts. He relied on, strictly speaking, just the Southern Poverty Law Center's claims about Ryan and never once connected Ryan to Kyle. It's clear here there really is no such connection.
And, me and a couple other guys were veterans. We're like, we can get in there and make sure dumb shit doesn't happen here right now. And we pulled in. There was another guy there who was working for the hospital to help secure that. And me and him chopped it up a little bit. He was in the 25th ID during the Global War on Terror. I was with 3rd ID during the Global War on Terror. We chopped it up a little bit. And he's like, you I'm not with these guys. I'm going to go back over there, but, maybe you can help them out. And started talking to the young guys and the owners. The owners are immigrants. Family business, and they were like, we lost $2 million worth of stuff last night, please help us with this. And I said, cool. And I looked at all of them and I was like, okay, you guys look really young. How old are you? And they all gave me legal ages.
So
Okay, so we'll pick up the legal ages here in a minute. But one thing is a bone of contention is whether the property owner agreed to have these people helping him defend the property. The property owner has come out and said, I had nothing to do with it. Ryan is basically making a point that the property owner was involved in the whole idea of protecting the property. Is this important? Probably not. I cannot see this even being an issue in the trial. It has no bearing on any of the murder charges or the minor in possession charge or anything. So it's more of just a side interest. I don't think that it really makes much difference. The only thing that you could do is maybe paint Kyle as being a bit dishonest around the night. And Ryan is going to make another claim here in just a second that Kyle was in fact dishonest about his age.
And he told you he was over 18?
Correct. And he was like, and I'm an EMT as well. And I'm like, cool, we're going to need a medic eventually at some point during the night, because we do expect things to get stupid, because they've been getting stupid throughout the week.
Okay, so real quick, I just want those watching, we posted the links to two of the articles that are out now circulating about Kyle, and the statement you just made where he identified himself as an EMT, that has been debunked by the Antioch Fire Department, who said he only went through a class. And having myself been first responder certified, you got to go through a major course and certification and do testing.
Correct.
So he...
What she's claiming, there are two things that Kyle lied or misled Ryan about. One, he basically lied and told him that he was 18 years old when he was actually only 17, or at least that's what Ryan is claiming. Now, keep in mind, Kyle has no legal obligation to be honest to Ryan anyway. And if I was Kyle, I would have probably lied as well. If I really want to be out there with my rifle and I have a veteran coming up and wanting to know how old I am and I'm only 17, I would have probably told him I was 18. Lying to make yourself feel old or make yourself appear older so that you can partake in certain activities is nothing new. I mean, every time you get a fake ID and try to get into a bar, it's pretty much the same thing. There's no law breaking here at this point because Kyle, again, does not have to be honest to Ryan. Now, as far as the EMT charges, one thing that's kind of struck me with Kyle was that he tends to use the term EMT like a synonym for just medic. At no point does he say that he is a certified EMT. And then later, during the night, during the Kenosha shooting night, he is asked point blank by a reporter, what are your qualifications? And he lists the fact that he passed a CPR test of some sort and that he was a lifeguard. He did not claim that he was certified as an EMT. So, in fact, is he impersonating an EMT? That kind of depends on your viewpoint. Keep in mind, he has not been charged with that crime. I doubt he will be. I don't think that there's really much there. It has no bearing whatsoever on the shootings. It makes no difference whatsoever if he passed himself off as an EMT. Kyle is kind of moving around with the truth a little bit there. He lied about his age. He's sort of misleading Ryan about his medical background. Take it for what it is.
Misrepresented those skills as well.
Correct.
Okay, so...
Now, keep in mind, there's another thing that's really important here, and this actually works in the defense's strategy as well. Ryan is claiming that Kyle lied to him. That gives Ryan credibility. If he came in here and instead said, no, I was really amazed with Kyle. Boy, what an honest kid, and he was truthful at all times, and by the way he handles that rifle, then he could be looked upon as too sympathetic of a witness to the defense. Here, he's claiming that Kyle lied to him, and that makes him look more objective.
So all around, Kyle was trying to get into something, from all appearances, allegedly. So after this initial conversation,
And she says he was trying to get into something. What is that? If she is going to make a claim that he was there to provoke violence, then say so. If you're wanting to say that he was trying to boss people around and become an authority figure, then say so. But to say something like, well, he was just trying to get into something, it's too vague. It's too open to interpretation.
these guys say that they're legal age and they're ready to do what did they say to you to indicate their purpose there?
Their purpose, and they were very clear about it, was to protect those properties because they worked for the people that owned them or knew each other. And like, well, cool, there's only 3 or 4 of you. There's about 5 or 6 of us that came down at that time. We had other people that came down after we had already set in. But
okay, so he's claiming that Kyle claimed that they had some sort of agreement or something with the property owner. Again, that's just a claim, and it very well may be false. And the property owner is saying just the opposite. Does it matter? No, it doesn't have any bearing whatsoever on any of the alleged crimes that took place that night.
I figured 10 people would be enough to secure one of the locations and, be able to keep the crowd calm and make sure nothing got torn up. And then we were trying to figure out how we were going to cover both locations of what we had. And then about that time, a bunch of trucks and vans pulled in. And some of them were bikers, some of them were, one guy announced himself as he had been a former Blackwater operative guy. And I was like, I was regular Army infantry, and we kind of, contractors do some things overseas that, we're not okay with at times. So I kind of was like, well, Eric, he can come with us. And I'm like, no, we don't want him anywhere near us. Like, these guys are trouble. And I was sitting there trying to get a little bit of on the ground intelligence and like, how far do the protesters typically get? Because the building we were at, which is where the shootings took place, didn't look damaged. There was nothing destroyed down there. I'm like, do they even make it this far? Like, do people even come down here to tear things up in front of the hospital? And they're like,
this is an interesting claim. He's claiming that Kyle and them were defending properties that were pretty far from the scene of any conflict. This tends to bolster Kyle's claim that he was there not to look for trouble. After all, if he's looking for trouble, the trouble wasn't even close to where they were. They were there to defend the property. The conflict may not have even went down that area. So in that sense, that helps Kyle out.
Like, nope, every night they've never not once made it down this far. And I'm like, cool, then we're going to leave these guys here because that's where they're not going to get into a confrontation with someone because of the way they were armed. You could tell they were kind of there to do some trouble.
Prosecution is going to come in and say, you claim that the way they were armed, that you could see that they were looking to get into something or something like that. Can you explain what you meant by that? The prosecution here is going to see an opening that Ryan sensed that Kyle was there to do something other than just protect property. The defense is going to come back and say, if you really felt that way, why did you have him tag along with you? And also, I would mention that none of Kyle's behaviors that night seemed to indicate that he was out looking for trouble. And in fact, during this time that he was watching over these properties, he's being interviewed, and he seems quite jovial and seems really be quite happy just sitting there watching over the car lot, and he has no interest in going in and getting involved in any of the fracas.
And I got everybody up, and we walked up to the northern building that the owners owned.
Okay,
and that one had gotten a lot of damage the night before.
I read your post of the explanation of what happened on Facebook, and from what I understand is you clearly defined the difference between who were Black Lives Matter activist protesters and the militia that were there to protect them and businesses, the police, and then the other group that I didn't know about were who you defined as agitators. Now, according to you, the agitators were the ones that were causing the problem, that weren't affiliated with any group, but they were the ones that were going in and doing the damage to the local properties and setting fires and such.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So were these people well defined by you, who they were?
I'm going to go ahead. It's going to seem like I'm getting off track, but I'm going to go back in.
Okay.
So my brother-in-law is a organizer for BLM in our local area.
Okay, if he can substantiate that in court, that will help the defense.
I'm well aware of what their values are and what they stand for. BLM made it very open and clear to us when we engaged with them who the problem people were, and disavowed them instantaneously on the ground. It only took one encounter with an individual to figure out that that's what they were there to do. The Antifa.
Okay, so he's going to be talking about Joseph Rosenbaum coming up. He's the person that Kyle shot first that night. And the only way I can describe Rosenbaum that night is belligerent lunatic.
The guys, they were a little aggressive with us until they figured out that we weren't there to kill them, because they had been fed information that there were going to be people coming down there with the express purpose of shooting the crowd and all this other junk. And the agitators, they were the ones running around trying to set fires, and you could tell who they were because BLM would start to jump on them as well. So it wasn't like they were uniformed or had some very clear way of telling who they were, but their actions spoke volumes, and we all noted it.
And I should add that of everyone there, of all the people there that night, there was one agitator who stood above all, and that was Joseph Rosenbaum. He's going to be talking about Joseph here in a little bit, but it's really clear that Rosenbaum is considered to be a troublesome person, even to the BLM side.
And this is including the one gentleman in the red T-shirt that had the clear plastic bag in his hand, right? That allegedly started the entire thing that happened with the shooter, and how that with who you know down there and how that started. Can you give us an idea of what happened?
Yeah,
Okay, so this is going to be very important. This is the testimony that's going to play well into the defense's hands, and you'll see why in a moment.
We had encountered the first victim several times throughout the night, and we'd always shoot him away by being vocally aggressive. He struck me as the kind of guy who wasn't going to do something unless he knew he had him out. He kind of had that. He gave you that feeling when he was around that he was trying to do something more than what everybody else was there to do. And at one point earlier, like before the shooting, about an hour before, somebody tried to set fire to a church. And there, a group of BLM protesters that we had dealt with amiably earlier in the night, he came running past, and these were skater kids, they probably weren't over the age of 18 either. And they came running past with their fire extinguishers. They were running around putting out fires set by these people. And one of the girls who we had just taken down to the hospital so she could get worked on for the gas and whatnot, she pointed out, that guy just tried to set the church on fire. Watch out for him.
Talking about Rosenbaum, the first shooting victim. The prosecution, this is a problem because Ryan is claiming that Rosenbaum tried to burn down a church. Now, Ryan was told this by a couple of other protesters that saw him do it, and the defense is going to try to find out who those people were. They'll have to track them down. That takes time and effort. One of the reasons why these court cases are so expensive is this, and this is going to be a really expensive one. There's so many witnesses to certain things that have taken place that night, and a lot of them are not named, and a lot of them are wearing face coverings and such. So it's going to be a long process to uncover these people. But if Joseph Rosenbaum did indeed try to burn down a church, there will be people that saw that. The prosecution had better hope that there are not any Bible thumpers on that jury.
So we already noted him in our minds. He disappeared for a little while. He came back and started getting aggressive with our guys. And we told him to fuck off, that that's not what we were here to do. You know, we're not here to fucking have a fight with you. We're here to make sure people are safe and that people's property doesn't get destroyed. And he was just like, fuck you, whatever. And then right about 30 minutes before the shooting, he went down to the gas station later in the night. He had that exchange with that individual. That was not Kyle.
Okay, well, we saw that in the other video that I created, the 5-part series. There is another protester that's dressed very similarly to Kyle. So similarly, sorry if I mispronounced that, even a lot of the analysts that had investigated the shootings afterwards kept referring to the person as Kyle. I know that Rick Gore on his Good Luck America channel did as much, even saying at one time that the fact that one of the BLM protesters tried to pull this one kid out away from
him, and two of his buddies walk up, and he looks at us and he goes, "If I catch one of you motherfuckers alone, you're dead."
This is the guy in the...
Uh-oh. The prosecution can now see their entire case slipping away. Kyle for this other kid.
Kyle was with me during that altercation. We were working on a compound fracture at the time. Somebody got hit with a rubber bullet and bones sticking out and all this other good stuff.
I didn't know that a rubber bullet could do that kind of damage. I suppose maybe the person that got hit by the rubber bullet fell or something like that. He's making a claim here that he and Kyle were working on helping somebody through some sort of medical procedure. That is going to work in the defense's favor. Kyle has stated many times on camera during that night that he was there to provide medical aid for people. He is shown on video helping somebody that had an injured foot, and now Ryan is claiming that they in fact were helping somebody with a compound fracture. If he can verify this, then that's going to strengthen Kyle's case.
But 30 minutes before the shooting, we were walking through the crowd, looking for people who needed aid, and him and two of his buddies walk up, and he looks at us and he goes, "If I catch one of you motherfuckers alone, you're dead."
This is the guy in the...
Uh-oh. The prosecution can now see their entire case slipping away. Now, keep in mind, the prosecution already has a big problem. And one is that even if Kyle had provoked the incident, Kyle ran from Rosenbaum. And Wisconsin law is very clear on this matter, that even if you provoke an incident, if you try to flee from the person, then you can reassert your self-defense claim later. So this is going to be a problem because now you have Rosenbaum making a physical threat against Kyle and Ryan. And that's going to make it really hard to believe that Kyle initiated the entire incident. Also, though, it underscores the intent on Rosenbaum to hurt Kyle. And again, in that first shooting, it was not well captured on video. There's some discussion about what really happened. Richie McGinnis, who is a reporter for the Daily Caller, admittedly a right-wing outlet, claimed, and he was right on top of the action, he claimed that Rosenbaum attacked Kyle and tried to take his gun. This testimony by Ryan that Rosenbaum threatened Kyle only reinforces that claim. The prosecution is going to have to work hard to undermine the credibility of Ryan Balch here. This is really a nail in the coffin if they can't do that. Frankly, I don't think that the prosecution has a prayer in the murder charges anyway, but this only makes it even harder.
The red shirt that made that him? Okay.
And once again, you know, I'm in a crowd of protesters. We're not looking for an altercation. We're not looking to hurt anyone. We just want people to remain calm. And we'd said that to the cops as well. You guys need to be doing what you can to keep these people calm. And he was like, yeah, fuck you. If I catch you alone, you're dead. Oh. And then Kyle got separated from us, and then that's when the shooting started.
Okay, so it'll...
And you can hear her breathe out like, she wasn't expecting that. What she thought was just a person that was going to come on and tell a story about how Kyle kind of parroted around and tried to act like a big man. She got wind of another element here, and she wasn't really prepared for that. This is a serious problem for the prosecution. Now, you might think, well, Ryan, his credibility could be undermined. He does seem to have at least a checkered past when it comes to his past social media. Also, some of the claims he's making, he's going to make another claim a little bit later about there being a second shooter, but some of the claims that he's making seem to be a little bit far-fetched. For example, the police trying to recruit him to essentially become law enforcement. I think the jury is going to be looking at that one a little bit askance. However, people have gone to jail because criminals who had already been convicted, who had already made a plea deal with the prosecution in exchange for their testimony, fingered them. Here, you can destroy the man's credibility all you want. He still has testimony, and it is enough to raise reasonable doubt among a jury. After all, despite what you think about Ryan, despite what you think about what maybe some of the things he's been saying, his claim that Rosenbaum threatened Kyle could be true. No matter how low his reputation sinks through interrogation, the jury has to always think his claim could be true, and that is reasonable doubt. Remember, you have to convince all 12 members that there was no self-defense.
You know, all of this hopefully will come out in court in due process, right? All of these charges against Kyle are alleged, and this is the whole point of the Black Lives Matter protest. We want due process for everyone, that the police themselves should not be executioners. We want everyone to have their day in court, including Kyle, right? So,
notice that her response to his claim is rather mild. Like, well, we'll have to let this play out in court. We'll have to see what Kyle deserves due process here. Ryan is making a claim that Rosenbaum threatened to kill Kyle earlier in the night. That would seem to merit far more response than what she's giving. Again, I don't think she was wanting to hear that, and I think it's kind of put her off stride a little.
Interesting point. So while you were out there, and we saw the video and you know, this curious statement by Kenosha police, did you see them doing other things or make other statements that led you to...
So no, she's moved on. Ryan makes a claim. He threatened to kill Kyle. And I would be, if I was interviewing, I'd come back and say, really, I mean, was he real nasty? Was he real threatening? Did he point his finger? How did he say that? Do you think he meant it? I would follow up with some questions. She doesn't want to do that. I don't think she was prepared for that. I think that she basically heard like, oh no, it might be that Kyle did not actually do anything wrong after all. And now she's just going to move on from there and start exploring other avenues.
Believe that maybe something's going on here that shouldn't be?
They never made any other statements beyond that made us feel like it was weird. Yeah, we had that exchange with the cop earlier on in the day who was like, yeah, it feels good having all these friendly guns out here. Beyond that, most of they seem to like, they kind of, you know how when your kid's doing something wrong and you kind of chide them and you kind of push them back on the right track? When we were visibly helping the protesters, what would happen? And most of us are pretty anti-establishment. I mean, politically speaking, I'm a libertarian, and most of my friends are. We kind of ride that line of anarchy a little bit there, but so we weren't going to like necessarily be siding with the police on anything.
And again, that's very consistent in that he does have a sense of, and he said he were going to ride the anarchy line a little bit. So he's clearly not a Trumper. He even said he's a libertarian. He voted for Joe Jorgensen, according to one of his quotes on social media.
And they seem to kind of want to coax us in the opposite direction. And that's why I said in my statement that it felt like, because they had just gassed us when they threw us the water. We let like 8 protesters that were in the little makeshift aid station we put in the building out, and they're like, "You need to get away from the building," and gas went everywhere.
And instituting we know that they instituted a curfew, but this Kyle was not necessarily, we saw a video where he was not challenged on that. Can you talk a little bit about what happened when they started issuing the curfew order and to disperse?
For us, it seemed to not apply. You see me on plenty of videos. We're walking around with impunity. The police did not want to cause a negative confrontation with us at all.
Now, Kyle has been charged with curfew breaking. To me, it was about the silliest thing I ever heard. Well, I mean, it's okay. I mean, go ahead and charge him with it, but people are really going off on it. It's a minor offense, a misdemeanor. Even if he's convicted of the charge, we're going to be looking at 48 hours in jail. He's already served a month. He will get time served, so he's not going to face any additional jail time on the curfew breaking. So why they did that, I'm going to put another video out on that down the road. In short, I think they did that just to tie up a loose end. People were critical of the prosecution because they had not charged Kyle with curfew breaking, even though they did charge a lot of BLM protesters. So I think they're just sort of trying to make it look consistent. I can't think of any other reason why they would do that. Some say that they are basically just trying to get something to stick on Kyle. Not so sure about that one. I did believe that originally, but in retrospect, I really do think that they're just trying to tie up some loose ends. The defense is going to come back and say, look, the police were there all the time. They even handed Kyle water. They even said, thank you for what you're doing. We caught that on video. So how can you claim that my client was breaking curfew when the police never told him? It's not a great defense. If he was breaking curfew, he was breaking curfew. My gut feeling is that Kyle will probably just plead guilty to it and take whatever minimal punishment they're going to hand out. It's not even worth worrying about. I think that Kyle's effort should be put into the more serious charges.
And I think that was kind of part of the whole, well, we want to pump these guys up and think whatever they're going to do is going to be okay and acceptable. And I mean, that's the way it started to feel to me. And all the veterans in the group, we started looking at all the people who weren't, and we're like, you guys need to really watch what you're fucking doing right now. And we started self-policing. We did have some people who were doing some things that were not okay.
Right.
And there were plenty of shouting matches amongst our group about that,
Okay, so we saw that in one of the other videos that I produced, that 5-part series. One of the patriots there was clearly belligerent. He was trying to get into some verbal exchanges, and Ryan basically told him to calm down, and they kind of walked him away from the protesters, and so they defused the situation. It was not Kyle, it was some other dude.
Stop doing that. We had one guy who, he was just a little, he got scared because somebody had thrown a bottle that it turned out later on it was filled with bleach and ammonia. and hit me with it, and it popped and exploded, and I was still kind of dealing with that. But
okay, so what he's described as a chemical attack, highly illegal. Mixing toxic chemicals and throwing them at people will land you in a lot of trouble. It's a federal offense. More importantly for Kyle is that this paints a picture that the people that were involved that night were not peaceful at all. They were mixing chemicals and throwing them on people. And Kyle got a whiff of it himself.
And he pointed his weapon at him after they had thrown it. And then the crowd got pissed off. And it was a large group of agitators at that time. Most of the BLM people kind of ran over when they saw what had happened. But
okay, so just to be clear, the kid that he's talking about was not Kyle, almost certainly not Kyle, because if it was, he would have mentioned it.
They tried to get pissy with him, and I had to fight through it and tell him, hey, I'm going to deal with that guy. But I don't know what you just threw at me, but you don't need to do that again.
In Wisconsin, tell me a little bit about the gun laws, because I'm from Illinois, where we have the FOID card, and we have some of the best training here. At least I thought till I saw Kyle. We have been the kind of the gold standard of training for.
Okay, so just to be clear here on this matter, she said that we have some of the best training for open carrying of weapons here in Illinois, unlike Kyle. But who is she to make that kind of claim? Does she come across to you as a person who's highly experienced with weapons? In my opinion, and I've been carrying weapons around for a long, long time. I owned my first 30-30 when I was 9 years old. I watched Kyle throughout the night. He handles his weapon very well. He was attacked. He only shot his attackers. He withheld fire when he needed to. And when all is said and done, after the shootings, he calmly walked to the police and gave himself up. Believe me, there's a lot of police officers out there that could learn a lot from Kyle Rittenhouse.
Safe and legal firearm owners.
Right.
But then we see someone like Kyle, and allegedly reports are coming out it was Kyle's mother with him. We're not sure. We're going to follow up on that. But how?
Yeah, Kyle's mother was not involved in this at all. She's really an unfortunate victim of a lot of misinformation. She dropped Kyle off the night before, didn't know he was going to a protest. Certainly didn't know about the gun.
How does this compare to Wisconsin with your open carry and ages and things like that?
Wisconsin is a full open carry state. If you're above the age of 18, you can legally open carry a long rifle.
So in another video, I discussed the minor in possession charge that has been levied against Kyle. Kyle's lawyer has claimed that Kyle was actually legally carried at 17 because of a militia rule. I went over this in detail. In my opinion, if I want to summarize it, I would say that the state is probably going to find Kyle as violating the Wisconsin statute on open carrying, and that if they want to take this to the federal appeals court, that they have a better chance at that one because of a constitutional definition of militia. If you're interested in hearing my comments on that, please see my other video.
So we did get a question in from one of our viewers. This is from Mike. He asked a question. He says, I might have missed this at the start, but what rules of engagement, escalation of force directives were agreed on or given to the group you were patrolling with?
Our group, I stated before we rolled out to the north end, we did have less than lethal options on us. They have these cans.
Kyle did not have less than lethal.
Pepper spray grenade type things that you can legally own and purchase civilian. Carry gloves with rubber fists on, with rubber, so that it softens the blow if you have to slap somebody a little bit. Our rules of engagement.
I mean, I don't understand that one. If I want to hurt somebody a little less, I just won't slap him as hard. So I don't know what, I'm not sure what he's talking about with these gloves that you wear that you can slap somebody and it lessens the impact. Okay, I've never seen one.
Engagement were no lethal force unless lethal force is being used on you. Property is not worth somebody's life.
His rules of engagement are actually stricter than Wisconsin's. Wisconsin doesn't require that you have to fear that your life is in danger. All you have to do is fear that you face serious bodily injury. And his rules of engagement are completely irrelevant here. He has no authority to establish anything beyond what the state requires.
And the only time that would change is if the damage to the property would have caused an obvious risk to life or limb to another human being.
Like a gas station setting fire to a
Right.
gas. Okay.
Yeah, you set fire to, there were 2 gas stations there. If somebody would have set fire to one of them, everybody in a 2-block radius would have been dead. So,
Or
yeah,
somebody's carrying an obvious bomb or a pipe bomb or something like that.
Right. It was very standard. Like I said, the vets that were out there were all GWAT vets, so we're used to a very stringent ROE.
ROE is?
Rules of engagement.
Okay, thank you.
The rules of engagement overseas for soldiers is way more stringent than what American police seem to be following.
What an interest.
Okay, so she asked, ROE is what? Rules of engagement. She's not an experienced gun owner.
Interesting point there, that in warfare, soldiers have a stricter set of rules than we are using here against our own citizens. And we talked about that a little bit with chemical warfare. So even the tear gas and things like that, that's against the Geneva Convention, but not for your own people.
Right.
Okay, and she's got this one fouled up. Let's be clear on this. The Geneva Convention outlawed the use of tear gas in military conflicts. There has been a treaty, and I'll post the name of it, I forget the name of it, but that was signed by multiple countries, including the United States, that allows tear gas to be used in domestic situations as crowd control. There's a reason for this, and the liberals always get this thing fouled up. And so let's be clear on this matter. Tear gas is outlawed in military operations because it can be used to convince an enemy that a real lethal chemical attack is underway, and therefore you can suppress enemy operations by doing things that make it look like they're being under attack by something far more deadly. The Geneva Convention decided that was really unfair in the rules of engagement, ROE, for armies to engage in. So that's the reason why tear gas is outlawed by the Geneva Convention for military operations. However, tear gas is legitimately used by numerous countries for crowd control. Why? It's not lethal. At least it's dying from tear gas is relatively rare. It's considered a non-lethal agent, and it's also very effective. You can lay out some tear gas and get a crowd moving. I've always asked people who don't like the police use of tear gas, what would you use instead? And I think deep down they would just say want the police to let them go ahead and pillage and rampage. However, if you really do want to control the crowd, the other options are not very good. The most basic one is the water cannon used in the civil rights movement. It can do some serious damage. It can kill a person, and it also has a very negative connotation because of its past use to suppress civil rights. Therefore, tear gas is a very good option to use in crowd control.
So interesting that you guys seem to be handling a lot better than the Kenosha Police Department, which is definitely troubling, I think. And
I will agree with her on this. The police chief, especially, in my opinion, comes across as a real dumbass. I cannot understand how anybody would have voted him in. But I'm going to have another video dedicated to the top 10 morons of the Kenosha shooting, and he's up there. Some of the claims he made afterward were just ridiculous, and it's going to undermine his credibility on the stand.
And the purpose of the entire protest, right? So the point is, when someone is shot by police, and in this case, Jacob actually survived it, not whole and intact from what we can, what we're hearing so far. But he gets his day in court. And even if Jacob went and robbed a bank and then went out to this dispute, still gets his day in court, right? So, and then when we have somebody who's convicted, misdemeanor, state law, felony, and they go to jail, they serve their time. And the way that I was raised in this country was you pay your dues and then you come back to society. We don't hold it over you for a lifetime.
Correct. That's the way it should be.
That's the way it says in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not profitable.
No.
No, it's not. So, all right. So now we've got this situation. It almost.
By the way, that little exchange about Jacob Blake, Ryan is not coming in and saying, well, I believe that the shooting of Jacob Blake was justified. The police have a really tough time. And if he had done that, then the jury might think, well, he's actually one of these alt-right people. He doesn't deny what she is saying here. He's all on board with her saying that Jacob Blake, and she's coming out saying it, that he really shouldn't have been shot. And he's like going, yeah. So that actually strengthens his credibility as being an objective person, not a pro-Kyle person.
Feels like, and you don't have to answer this, but from an outside point of view, covering each and every one of these incidences, it feels like the police department is actively participating with the agitators to escalate situation. We saw this in Portland, we saw it in Seattle, we've seen it here in Chicago, where all they needed to do was just let people vent and protest, and if someone did step out of line, address that person. Instead, they're firing rubber bullets, tear gas canisters, and in some cases, live ammunition. So what is your take on what's going on in Kenosha? Do you feel like that's the case, or are the pictures and reports that we're seeing from independent media, do we have it all wrong?
I know within my segment of the side, there are rumors that there are, like, and it's been confirmed. I mean, you can go back to like protests for Occupy and see that the cops do send people out there to agitate and to start fires and turn it into something that it's not. I didn't see anybody who matched that description while I was out there, but they definitely were not interested in stopping it. I think that they knew they had enough bad elements coming in. Well, we were driving in, and I'll use the term infiltrate into Kenosha because you had to. They had blocked off all the highways going in, and you had cops armed with dump trucks and their patrol rifles and stuff blocking the highway off. We actually had to, find a little podunk road to follow that to another podunk road to get to a larger road to get into Kenosha. And
Okay, so he's claiming that they went into Kenosha when the police distinctly did not want them to. Keep in mind, Kyle was already in Kenosha when this all happened, so he didn't have to try to find ways to get down to the property at all.
We were sitting low, like trying to get past the cops to get in there to do what we needed to do. But we had gotten intel from friends who were watching what was going on. We had outside comms with people who knew we were going. We were like, we're going to watch live streams. We're going to watch the scanners for the police. We're going to make sure that you guys have the information you need on the ground. And there was a report that there were like 60 or so Minnesota vehicles that were coming down Green Bay Road, which runs right along the lake, and that there were people coming in from Chicago and Michigan, and there had been a Facebook post from a Minnesota group saying they were coming down there to tear it up. So we were rolling into a situation where we knew we were going to have agitators. We weren't sure how many we were going to have, And we knew that the police, up to that point, had never done anything to stop it.
True story. So
I don't think they had to get someone to come in there and do that. They just
it was ready made for him. So
Antifa outlet called me a white supremacist Proud Boy. And I'm like, I hate those guys. Like, what are you talking about? I think that, yeah, I'll probably be, if I do that again, when I do that again, I'll be rocking a GoPro just to, so I get a POV shot of what I'm doing.
So he mentions the Proud Boys and even says, I hate those guys. The prosecution is going to try to go back to his earlier social media and try to interrogate that particular point. Do you really hate them? Here's what you said back in 2017. We'll see how that plays out. But here's something that's really important to also understand. The prosecution is going to have to try to paint Ryan as a person willing to lie to help Kyle. And they're going to have to do that by trying to tie them together ideologically. They are not ideologically comparable. Kyle is very pro-police. He has a lot of testimony on that. They're going to introduce that in the trial repeatedly. They're going to show him in that little Smokey Bear hat, which is part of a little cadet program for the police. I know that he has tried to raise funds for a police fundraiser of some sort. I can't remember what it was, but he clearly has a real love for the police. And in fact, a lot of people have painted him negatively because of that. Ryan Balch has no love for the police. He is ideologically opposed to Kyle in this sense. There's no hint that he knows Kyle and really even agrees with him on half the stuff that Kyle believes in. So I think that the prosecution is facing an uphill battle here.
If you stream it, let us know, and we will boost that signal for you.
All right.
So yeah, absolutely. So one of my questions, and I do have a little bit of concern about this interview because you and I talked about I'm overly protective.
Right.
So now you have outed yourself, not just in your statement, but in this interview as somebody who is not part of the Proud Boys, not part of the alt-right. You actually support the purpose and mission of Black Lives Matter in peaceful protest.
Okay, keep in mind what she is saying there is a source of contention. The Hate Watch bunch and the Southern Poverty Law Center is making a claim that his past social media presence seems to indicate otherwise. That will be something that will be bandied back and forth during the trial.
Are you concerned about your personal safety?
I've been concerned about my personal safety since all this started. Like I said before, I got hit on camera and I was getting named as things that I wasn't. And that was one of the, I've caught flack from the right side of the house since a lot of this stuff started. Because, what's right is right. And yeah, people may do wrong things or may stand for some wrong things, but a broken clock is right twice a day. I'm not so concerned about them necessarily. Most of the feedback that I've gotten from the right wing has been mostly positive. It's kind of the far left elements that I was kind of concerned about not getting the right answers and not getting the true answers and just going off on that tangent. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I made the official statement and why I'm willing to talk.
Perfect. Love it. And I think at the end of your statement, you summed it up really nicely about the effort to sow division. And we've talked about it here on this network that even with all of our progressive policies, 9 out of 10, we can get the hardline conservative and the leftist anarchists to agree that it's the right path forward. So with your statement, you kind of alluded to that. There's one last statement that I think we need to address. This is from the Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin. And she posted this statement, and it was in the article that I just published a link to. So Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, She was quoted as saying, "These armed men who have no connection to even the state." The guy is from out of town. I think she's talking about Kyle. So think about how ridiculous that is, Barnes said. Who is he accountable to? Nobody. And for him, for him to even be able to shoot somebody and walk away from the scene, you know that they talk about finding a knife inside a car, not even on Jacob Blake's person. This guy is carrying a long gun. Killed somebody, just walked away freely, was able to get back home to Illinois. Then you know we got much bigger problems on our hands. So here she seems to be talking about the disparity in how police are treating these folks, whether it was the long gun that put them off or the color of his skin. He was able to walk with impunity even after witnesses said he shot somebody, and the police did not move on it. Whereas...
Okay, so let's go back to that point, the quote here, because this is the kind of stuff that is irresponsible and based on misinformation. So let's take a look. Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, in my opinion, probably belongs on that moron list, but not involved enough into the Kenosha shootings to be worthy of mention. But here we go. These armed men who have no connection to even the state. That's absolutely not true. Kyle Rittenhouse, for example, did have a connection to Kenosha. He worked there, and he lived about 15 miles away. He was a frequent visitor. So the idea he had no connection to the state of Wisconsin is patently false. The guy is from out of town. So think about how ridiculous that is. Supreme Court ruled many, many, many years ago that you carry your rights wherever you go in the country. That if you are from Illinois, that when you go to Wisconsin, your rights are going to be the same as a person from Wisconsin. The fact that he is from out of town has no bearing on anything at all. Who is he accountable to? Nobody. That's patently false. He's accountable to the justice system just like anybody else. If you are from Illinois and you commit a crime in Wisconsin, you are going to be held according to Wisconsin law. And he is. He's going to have to go on trial for these supposed killings. Well, not supposed killings, supposed murders, alleged murders. And for him to even be able to shoot somebody and walk away from the scene, well, he shot Rosenbaum. He didn't exactly walk away from the scene. He was chased. And then after he was assaulted again and basically shot a couple of people there, he was able to walk freely away from that scene, primarily because the people attacking him finally got a clue that chasing after somebody who has an AR-15 is going to use it is a really dumb thing to do. And so he was able to walk. Now, was he accosted by the police? He tried to turn himself in. That's a whole other point of contention. But I think most people are under the impression, well, at least most people who actually watched the event are probably under the impression that the police didn't think he had done anything. They heard some shootings. They see a person down, and they're trying to get to that location. They even told him, get out of the way. So the idea somehow that they knew that he had shot somebody and just allowed him to walk away is patently false. They talk about finding a knife inside the car, not even on Jacob Blake's person. Okay, so let's just try this. They talk about finding a knife inside the car, and even on Jacob Blake's person. Doesn't matter. If he had a knife in the car and he was getting into the car, he's considered armed. Tennessee versus Garner comes into play at that moment. If the police officer saw the knife and saw him getting into the car, he had already committed a felony, he was trying to flee, and he was a danger to the community because he has kids in the back. Under those circumstances, they are probably not going to file charges against them, or at least not try them, because Tennessee versus Garner is clear on this matter, that if you have a fleeing suspect that is armed and is a threat to the community, you can open fire on him. And so the fact that the knife was in the car, not on his person, irrelevant. This guy is carrying a long gun, killed somebody just walking freely, was able, gosh, you're English. This guy is carrying a long gun, killed somebody just walking freely, was able to get back home to Illinois. Well, yeah, he lives in Illinois. His friend Dominic drove him. Yeah, he was able to get back because he got in a car and drove off. then you know we got much bigger problems on our hands. The bigger problem that we have on our hands are people like Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, completely unable to understand what took place, unwilling to investigate first before shooting his mouth off. Mandela Barnes, I assume, is a male. I didn't even look it up, but I assume it's a man. This is just the kind of rhetoric that is irresponsible. It comes off as just dumb.
In how police are treating these folks, whether it was the long gun that put them off or the color of his skin, he was able to walk with impunity even after witnesses said he shot somebody, and the police did not move on it. Whereas the narrative that we're seeing with Jacob is he had a piece of kitchen cutlery in his car. So you live in Wisconsin. What are your thoughts about all of these people who are coming in under the guise of Blue Lives Matter and shutting down the protests?
I think that they need to remember that the First Amendment applies to everyone. I don't have a problem with people coming in from out of state to protest or counter protest, whatever. I mean, but if you're doing that, you need to remember that you're a guest.
That's actually not true. You're not a guest. Your rights are the same in Wisconsin as they are in Illinois.
And you need to act how a guest should. You don't tear up the people who are giving you hospitality's house, you know. I think that those two sides can have more of a conversation instead of yelling at each other. I mean, we were able to do that on the ground out there. Even Kyle, who's super naive and whatnot, started to see the reason why people were out there with the cops doing what they were doing.
Okay, it's making it clear he's not a pro-Kyle person. He evidently didn't know Kyle and doesn't seem to have, I wouldn't say a lot of respect for Kyle. I don't think he has any disrespect for him, but Kyle's not somebody he holds up as a hero, unlike a lot of people.
On the Jake Blake thing, I know that they've put out a lot of bullcrap. As soon as I saw that little meme that was like, oh, he's a pedophile, I'm like, no, third-degree sexual assault in Wisconsin is just like the catch-all. They just throw that at you. And even then, they're all accusations at this point. It's a warrant.
Right. He hasn't had his day in court.
He hasn't had his day in court. Yeah. You don't shoot somebody just because they have a warrant. Police are supposed to, they're not judge, jury, and executioner. They're supposed to apprehend the individual and let due process happen.
Okay, it's a gross oversimplification what happened with Jacob Blake. Regardless of whether you're pro-Jacob or anti-Jacob, it's clearly not just a simple case where they showed up and shot him. There was an altercation. Both sides will admit that. Jacob Blake tried to get away. And whether the police were right in shooting him because they saw a deadly threat or not, that is one thing to argue about. But just to claim that they shot him over a warrant is completely disingenuous. However, keep in mind, does he sound like an alt-right person here? Just about every alt-right person I know, and I know a few, they are adamant in the fact that the police were in the right and Jacob Blake was a pedophile, deserved it, and he was a lunatic. I mean, so I don't look upon Ryan here as discussing this matter like an alt-right person would.
With Kyle's situation and why the cops didn't act on him is largely probably due to the presence that we had on the ground.
Can you clarify that a little bit? You think that clarify when you say your presence on the ground might be what contributed to Kenosha Police Department hands off with Kyle?
We had guys on the rooftop behind them. The guys that had larger caliber rifles, we put them on the roof. because that's, you want to utilize what you do have in the proper manner. Some of the stuff that was on top of that roof, the cops wouldn't have been able to defend themselves against.
A lot of people might say, well, wait a minute, Kyle was carrying one of those really deadly AR-15s. AR-15 is a deadly weapon. However, it's not particularly high-powered. The bullet is relatively small. It does come out with a high amount of energy, but it is nothing in comparison to some of the deer rifles I own. For example, I have a 30-06 that could do some serious damage to somebody. I shudder to think about what would happen if I ended up shooting somebody with that thing. It's meant for big game, and it kicks like a mule as well. So what he's describing are probably some of the deer rifles, the 308s and such, and the 30-06s that some of the people were carrying. The AR-15 is relatively lower powered in comparison to those rifles.
They made the arrest. We wouldn't have stopped them by any means. I didn't speak with Kyle after the shooting. The last time I saw him was when we got separated, and I didn't even know he was one of the shooters until me and independent media started showing me the footage that they had. There was also another shootout happening down the street. There's several videos I'm talking about in the video that got edited. We're trying to figure out how many shooters there were. And
there were gunshots that were going off after Kyle started walking towards the police after the second set of shootings. However, I don't believe anybody was shot during those exchanges, and so I'm not sure. When he's talking about a shooting, I assume he's talking about somebody actually getting shot.
Shooter went this way, one shooter went that way. And we all kind of agree, there's two shooters. After we took care of the wounded that were up at near the gas station, we had charged at whoever was shooting down there with the intentions of taking them out, because the cops weren't moving at all.
Well, it's also a strong possibility, as was the case with you guys and the Black Lives Matter guys, the cops were just unaware of what was happening at the time.
It is a possibility, but where the last two shootings happened, that was right in front of where the cops were. They weren't even 50 yards away.
So they were right there.
I was standing next to the cops when I heard the gunshot. I think they didn't know what the hell was going on and just froze up. It took...
Yeah, I tend to agree. People are saying that, well, Kyle wasn't detained because he's white. I think that's patently ridiculous. When you hear a shooting and somebody's gone down and you're looking for an active shooter, you're not going to care about the color of the person's skin. Now, there was an initial call made in that the shooter was black, and there's a reason why I think that happened. During the time when Kyle is running, one of the spectators, and I'm sure he's black, as you could tell by sort of the vocal dialect, he called him the N-word, and the person that was dialing in was probably behind Kyle, watching Kyle run from him. Somebody heard the N-word, called the police, and therefore assumed that the person must have been a black. Police aren't going to say, oh, he shot somebody, but yeah, he's white, let him walk on by. It just doesn't work like that. They probably heard the other shots going off and assumed that whoever was shooting was still out there and that this kid was not one of the shooters because he's walking towards us. Get out of our way. We've got active shooting going on and we have some injured people to tend to. I'm guessing that's what happened.
Because we got on site down there at the other location, and whoever was down there shooting was still shooting at the crowd. And they didn't stop shooting until me, a couple of armed Antifa members, and my friend that put the tourniquet on the guy that got his arm shot, until we rolled into the area and started making our presence known. At that point, he stopped and only gave pot shots to keep his position hidden so we couldn't see him. So we couldn't make a shot on the guy.
So this individual walked away without being identified?
Well, he went into an apartment building, and the police eventually came around and surrounded him. And then there were gunshots that ensued between those two parties.
So there's a second shooter besides Kyle.
Yeah, I don't know about this. I'm going to have to check into that. This is kind of new to me. If one thing is clear, after Kyle shot Huber and Grosskreutz, he starts walking toward the police, and you can still hear shots ringing out. I assume that's what he is referring to here. And according to him, the police rounded this person up in an apartment. That's news to me. I didn't know anything about that.
Yes.
That we should be looking for.
I think the police may have apprehended him.
Okay. No, I think
They're
the
not
media.
necessarily going to tell anybody who that is, right?
Right.
I'm sure they're not.
Yeah.
Wow.
But everybody that was down there agreed that, I mean, I've been shot at before. and down there in that car area, there were definitely bullets flying around.
Right.
And Kyle was already up the road and trying to turn himself in, and then went back to the northern area.
Okay. This is definitely new information that is not being reported. So let's see if we can track this one down. So
the only people that I have, and this is did knock me flat on my ass when I saw it. The only people that have actually said anything about it is the New York Times. And I was like, "Whoa, New York Times." Okay.
Yeah, sometimes good journalists get something right past an editor, and even the New York Times. It does happen. So we are actually at the top of the hour, and Ryan, I so appreciate you coming in to tell your side of the story and to correct the record, not only for us but for everyone else. So Andy, I have once again dominated the conversation. I'm gonna give you the last word and take us out.
Well, I just wanted to just button it down real quick with Kyle, is that from what I'm hearing, it sounds that this is more of a case of, a young teenage guy full of piss and vinegar, with a firearm going out with what he understands as what needs to be protected, and at being the father of a just until recently teenage child, that a lot of times these kids don't necessarily think about the consequences of their actions. And maybe that Kyle was put into a situation where he was forced to do something that he wasn't necessarily equipped or ready to handle. And it just escalated past his age, per se.
Okay, so just in defense of Kyle, first of all, he's certainly well equipped to handle the situation. He has an AR-15 rifle. You don't know what more you could really want if you're in that situation. The other one is, as far as emotionally equipped, he handled himself really quite well. He ran from Rosenbaum. Rosenbaum tried to take his rifle, and he shot Rosenbaum. And then, of course, after shooting someone, he is probably kind of losing his marbles a little, like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And he hears a mob basically descending on him. Well, let's say a crowd. And he runs like he's supposed to. There are people who said, well, they should have stuck around. And you got to be kidding me. He did exactly what I would have done. If I hear angry people coming my way, I'm going to get the hell out of there. Think about what would have happened if he had stayed around and the mob attacked him and he had to shoot somebody. They would have claimed, well, you had the opportunity to escape and you didn't. You chose to stick around. So you can't win in that deal. He then gets attacked by a number of people. He withholds his fire. He only shoots those that attacked him. He lands almost all of his bullets on target, and then he turns himself into the police. As far as emotionally goes, I think he did really quite well. I think there's a lot of people that would not have done well, even police officers. I have another video where I give you some good examples where police officers really lost control of their faculties during some heated exchanges. And Kyle did not. He did not panic. And so I think this is unfair. I think people just assumed that being 17-year-old, that he must have panicked and stuff. I don't see any sense of it.
And is that, in your mind, a fairly correct statement?
That is a fairly correct statement. Cal's a young kid, naive.
Yeah.
He was, and I'm of the opinion that he felt like he was defending himself in the 3 shootings.
Right.
The statements from the guy who shot first to us, and at the time I had no idea who he was, who the first person that got shot was, until they started releasing information about it. I feel like he got forced into a situation and he acted. And I'm not here to say whether that was right or wrong.
Good point. And this will establish credibility with him, with the jury.
Right. Right.
That was between, whoever was attacking him and whoever was chasing him. They made their conscious decision, and he had to make a conscious decision. Would I have reacted differently to it? I'm not sure if it would have gotten as far as it did had it been me instead of him.
Right.
Judge will not allow that last part of the testimony to be entered into the record or the jury to hear it. It's not up to Ryan Balch to decide whether Kyle acted appropriately or not. He can only talk about what he witnessed, the facts involved. He can give opinions on certain things, but he can't form legal conclusions from any of it. Now, the last thing he mentions there,
and at the time I had no idea who he was, who the first person that got shot was, until whoever was attacking him and whoever was chasing him, they made their conscious decision, and he had to make a conscious decision. Would I have reacted differently to it? I'm not sure if it would have gotten as far as it did had it been me instead of him.
Right.
his claim that Rosenbaum would have likely not taken it to this level with Ryan is probably true, but not for the reasons that you think. It's not because necessarily Kyle did something wrong there. Ryan is a bigger guy, and he has a commanding presence, as I've mentioned before. He apparently has military experience, and he conveys himself as somebody who can handle himself. I don't think Rosenbaum at 5'3", 140 pounds or whatever, would have attacked Ryan in the same way he attacked Kyle. Kyle's a younger kid. He's much smaller, not smaller than Rosenbaum, but he is definitely not a threatening type of figure. And I definitely think that Rosenbaum attacked Kyle because I think Kyle was the easier target. So I do agree with Ryan here, again, that if it had been Ryan involved, Rosenbaum would not have attacked him, and nothing would have happened that night. But it's simply because of Ryan's size and demeanor.
Yeah. So clearly, I think that there's the point, a moral of this might be that if you're boots on the ground in a situation like this, it's more maybe worth your time to investigate who's there with live arms, you know.
Absolutely.
And make sure that something like this isn't necessarily going to happen, where cooler heads are going to prevail as opposed to inexperienced, you know, shooters that could potentially escalate things out of control and get people killed, like what happened.
So notice, experienced shooters that could escalate things out of control. He's still trying to pin this on Kyle. Rosenbaum may have escalated this thing. In fact, it looks to me like Kyle tried to de-escalate. He ran. He tried to get away from Rosenbaum. Rosenbaum chased him. So the idea that Kyle being an inexperienced shooter who escalates the violence, I think is completely unfair.
Correct. For us, I'm going to use Army terms, but operationally, the group of friends that I went down there with, we've had discussions about this, and the biggest mistake we made that night was allowing ourselves to be separated. That's your number one rule in patrolling that we all learned. You never get separated from your buddy. And we allowed that to happen. And that kind of snowballed into all the stuff. And
Yeah, that was shown on the video, one of the 5-part series. Kyle did get separated from Ryan. He goes up a street, he kind of comes back, and I think it looks like he's trying to find Ryan. At any rate, Kyle did get separated, and that allowed Rosenbaum an opportunity at him. I think that if Ryan was there, Rosenbaum wouldn't have done anything. In fact, Rosenbaum had an opportunity earlier and didn't, because both of them were there. According to Ryan, Rosenbaum said that if I ever catch one of you by yourself, I'm going to kill you. And Kyle got separated, was by himself. I think Rosenbaum saw an easy target. Of course, it was kind of dumb because Kyle Rittenhouse is carrying an AR-15 rifle. But nobody will ever accuse Joseph Rosenbaum of being a very intelligent person.
Everybody been moving in pairs. I don't think that the gumption would have been there on any party to do something.
Agreed.
Like they did.
Right. So definitely a learning experience.
Oh yeah, it's terrible how it had to happen.
Absolutely. And it just, what we know about mainstream media and the alt-right is something, they take a situation like this and they turn it around and they, vilify Black Lives Matter, right?
And they vilify Kyle Rittenhouse.
Doesn't help anybody.
Correct. There's a lot of vilification going around. And there's a lot of people out there that just don't have the facts. And I'd rather people get the facts than just go off of, what somebody said.
Okay, so what can we learn from this? Well, there are a number of claims here made that's going to play a big role, I think, in the upcoming trial, and creates more trouble for the prosecution than the defense by a wide margin. One, there's a claim that Joseph Rosenbaum actually threatened Kyle before the incident. That's big. And also, many of the claims that Ryan made during the night are going to be looked upon as a little bit hard to believe by the jury. Now, the prosecution has a problem. They have a witness that's willing to go on there to testify, and he's not willing to go on there, they'll subpoena him. And they have testimony videotaped of a claim that he made that Joseph Rosenbaum physically threatened both him and Kyle. He's going to have to pretty well stick with that. And so the jury is going to hear a witness say that Joseph Rosenbaum threatened Kyle. And that type of threat is consistent with the behavior of Joseph Rosenbaum all night. It's not going to be hard to believe. Now, the prosecution is going to have to somehow get the jury to thinking that they can disregard the entire comments. That's going to be almost impossible, in my opinion. Why? Well, because you have to convince all 12 people. And even if you undermine Balch's testimony to a certain extent, there's going to be jury members who are going to think, I think that some of his claims are kind of wild, but he could be correct in claiming that Joseph Rosenbaum did threaten Kyle. I just cannot see how the prosecution is going to be able to counter this testimony. This is rough. And you also have to look at the testimony of Richard McGinnis. McGinnis claimed that Rosenbaum attacked Kyle. That's another problem with the prosecution. They basically have two of the top witnesses in this event are going to be called by the defense. That's never a good thing. You want most of your top witnesses to be called by the prosecution if you're the prosecutor, and I don't see that happening. There was no better witness to the first shooting than Richie McGinnis. And there's no better witness to all of the events that took place that night than Ryan Balch. So, in my opinion, I think that the prosecution has a real problem here. If I'm the prosecution, I drop charges. I don't see any way that they're going to be able to counter this. And you can go ahead and undermine Ryan's credibility all day long if you like, but his testimony does come across as genuine in terms of his encounters with Rosenbaum. And all I can say is I hope that this interview with Ryan Balch has opened some new eyes here, that has maybe given you some more background, more context about what happened that night. I didn't conduct the interview. That was done by Hair of the Dog. By the way, I do think they did a really good job on this. They are from the left-hand camp. I think that Ryan Balch's claim that Joseph Rosenbaum threatened Kyle's life took them by surprise. They weren't expecting that. And you can see it kind of rattled them a little bit. Overall, though, I really do think they did a good job on this. They didn't try to counter any of Ryan's claims. They let him talk. And overall, good job. They come off as pretty objective in this. So I do have some disagreements with some of their takes on other things that were primarily a result of a slanted medium. At any rate, please like or subscribe to my channel. I have a whole bunch of new Kyle Rittenhouse stuff coming out here in the future. We're going to talk about the top 10 morons of that night. There's plenty, and I think you know who are going to be up there on top of the list already. And there's going to be another one I'm going to talk about is the bail issue with Kyle, and was it fair? Is that a problem with race in this country? We'll examine that with some facts. So anyway, like or subscribe to my channel, and appreciate you watching.